In the name of God, Creator, Redeemer and Sustainer. Amen. I've often wondered whether the disciples, the apostles and the saints ever felt fear. I would be much encouraged if they had. However, there's not much fear expressed in the Gospels, apart perhaps from Jesus in the garden wanting the cup of suffering and death to be taken away. And in the Acts of the Apostles, which we hear right through the Easter season as the first reading, as for this morning, there's a boldness and an obedience and above all action that is absolutely stunning. I hear the good news and sometimes my response might be some fear and a certain passivity. So why don't we actually hear anything about where the disciples after the resurrection felt any fears or had any doubts? I suspect it's because fears and doubts didn't and don't actually matter. The task of speaking and living the good news was so central to the apostles' being and so dear to their hearts that fear was the least interesting thing to record in the scriptures. I suspect that they did feel fear because we hear of other emotions they certainly felt, let down at times and sad in relationships, but they are encompassed as part of the task which turns them to rely ever more deeply on the love and compassion of God. Because fear is probably immaterial to us speaking the good news. Fear is perhaps the most common reason people, some of very long experience in the church, have for not being open about faith as a way to invite others in. We'll get any version of, I don't want to offend anyone, I don't want to push the scriptures down their necks. Well, I don't think that the only alternate to polite is silence. I don't believe that the only alternative to being with someone who's hugely different is to dodge and so be silent. This portion from Acts this morning today is quite a fabulous piece. It's only in this particular portion, and it shows us how to be what God has called us to be and sends us out to be. But it's also one of the most threatening portions to those who feel that the church is at least as important as God. This portion simply writes off so many of our institutional programs. It cuts off at the knees so many of our expectations of who and how others might be involved in the faith community. Some of these, Philip is crazy obedient. He's sent into the wilderness. There's no detail of preparation or provisions. The highlight is he got up and went. The Ethiopian high-ranking trusted court official, he may have been black, a detail that's not considered important. And I would suggest as colour is immaterial to hearing and listening to the scriptures, although the church over the centuries has not lived it that way. Philip doesn't hesitate to approach the chariot nor to speak to this man. Consider, of course, that the Ethiopian may worship in God, but his eunuch condition would have meant that he was actually exiled from it. He could be close, but not in it. That would have ruled him out at one level. And this appalling breach of propriety by Philip, getting into a chariot and close enough for conversation, seems also immaterial. Because it is. We have often as a church, said propriety is more important than trotting alongside the chariot and saying, "Do you understand?" But the eunuch, who is a high-ranking official, certainly understands that there are hoops to be gone through, various protocols to understand, and so he asks, having heard from Philip about the scriptures and some explanation of who Jesus is, whether there's anything to prevent him being baptised. Apparently, there's nothing. Not his colour, nor his race, nor his physical condition, nor his wealth, nor his political position, nor his foreign background, nor his piety, nor lack of godparents can separate him from God in baptism. Afterwards, there's nothing from Philip about going regularly to church, forming a new church, because Philip is just snatched away. Philip's courageous going out resulted in one of the oddest, most encompassing and affirming early baptisms. I have to admit that over my time in ministry, there have been occasions where at baptisms, and there might have been several at once in the morning, and I've thought, try not to remember that whether these godparents and or parents appear to be committing perjury in front of you or not, what's important is God's promise and faithfulness to them. My ego, my vanity, my whatever is immaterial. The focus needs to be upon God's gift. The response of the eunuch to the message of Jesus is automatic. God is at work, baptise me. And despite all the difficulties that the early church was being persecuted in Jerusalem, God is always in us, still at work. And this needs to be heard very clearly for us too. Our situation is not persecution. Our situation is perhaps closer to apathy and reputation in our community. But God is still at work, and still at work through us if we will but give God a chance. God's will be done. The promise and hope is for us too. Last week we looked at God as Christ as shepherd, realising the emphasis is on the shepherd rather than the sheep. And today the emphasis isn't so much on either the faithfulness of the one who is sent, Philip, nor even on the strangeness of the one who is reading and hearing the Eucharist. The focus is on God's welcome for all. So do we really live this? I'd like to suggest that over the centuries we have not been living this story of baptism and welcome. But not for a moment do I think we should not grab every opportunity to pick up on someone's desire or even vague inquiry like, "I want my kids done," not to be able to say, "Do you understand?" It would be easy for us as a congregation to look around Sunday by Sunday and be a bit despondent. Too many empty pews, too many elderly faces, not enough energy. But to focus on these things is to focus in the wrong direction. And where we do focus in the wrong direction, we forget God's faithfulness to us as God's people. What we may need to be looking at is what are we doing to help God's faithfulness be shown in this contemporary world in which we live. We're not the ones who are in the chariot, strange and foreign as many might consider contemporary Christians to be. We're the Philips. We're the ones who are called to trot alongside wherever and in whatever wilderness that might be and ask, do you know what you're reading, seeing, experiencing? I do wonder if this particular portion of Acts is pushing us to consider that instead of trying to bring people in, We try and make places for people to experience the divine first. The eunuch was in the wilderness, and many describe mountaintop experiences as important for them as coming to experience a sense of the divine and their place in God's creation, rather than being the dross at the bottom of a pile. Yesterday was World Labyrinth Day, and they can be the most magnificent and beautiful things themselves, and they can be wonderful ways for people to explore life and the divine. The beautiful one, which is outside Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, has been fabulous, and it gives people access 24/7 to an experience that they can then take inside if they wish to when the cathedral is open, to perhaps have God named more explicitly, and gives those there a chance to say, do you understand? The divine is out there. How do we contribute to its being seen? Our buildings may well be very beautiful, and this one certainly is. But the early communities of faith didn't have buildings, but they did have hospitable table communities. They may not have had highly sophisticated rituals, but they had places of love and conversation and commitment to care for each other. So how do we show that sort of love beyond these walls? How do we make explicit the love of God? By caring for creation with as much tenderness as we experience tenderness from God, welcoming others to tread as we do on a labyrinth in the path of the disciples. I think I've said before on occasion, you may or may not be familiar with the Anglican definition of evangelism. This is a little tongue-in-cheek. Be nice to someone and hope they guess why. We need to make sure there is no need to guess. As disciples, I think we do need to fear. We need to fear that we'll be satisfied with politeness rather than with faithfulness. We do need to fear that we will luxuriate in the gorgeousness in here and not live that explicit divine gorgeousness beyond these walls. I think we do need to fear that we will not see the divine in wilderness places and be willing to trot alongside that. When these are our fears, and we remember from this morning's reading, perfect love casts out fear. When those are our fears, we will be fearless in speaking the good news beyond these walls.